So we're going to talk about protecting the character of your town. And the reason I started doing these Citizens Town Halls is because your city council is being circumvented. And a lot of them either don't know it or don't care. There are regional unelected agencies and boards that are planning the future of your town. What's with that? Citizens aren't aware, and I'm afraid by the time you realize that it's obvious, it's going to be too late. And so we want to help you understand what's happening. I think the bottom line is if you come away from this conversation at the end of it and say, hey, I like what's happening to my town, then, you know, that's cool. That's your choice. But I think a lot of people, once they really understand what's going on, are going to be concerned enough to get involved. And that's my hope this evening, so that you can make an informed decision. So our objective is to provide you with some high-level awareness of some of the issues. If you want to get more involved, there can be additional presentations and conversations. So we want to start the discussion, and we want to lay out a plan of action for people that are interested in getting involved. So why did you choose to live in your town? Well, most people would say that they're living in their town because there's good schools, because for me in the Bay Area, access to employment opportunities. There's a lot of companies to choose from if you're in high tech. Sometimes you succeed, sometimes you don't in some of these high tech companies, but there's always another one coming around. And so the Bay Area is really good for that because you can live in one place and have a lot of opportunities to work. A suburban lifestyle, safety, and the look and feel of your neighborhood. And the bottom line is all of those are threatened right now. And I want to talk about the threat. The threat is coming from a lot of different areas, and we're going to focus on just a couple right now for this presentation. We're going to talk, a lot of it's coming from federal in terms of the mandates that are coming down from the HUD, Housing and Urban Development, the EPA, and the Department of Transportation. They all have funds, and they're trying to suggest how your town should develop, so that's one issue. Things are coming from the state, things are coming regionally, and things are coming at us locally. So we got a lot of stuff coming in from a lot of different directions. So in the Bay Area, the players that you need to know are the state of California Housing and Community Development, HCD. Most people never heard of it. It's a bureaucracy up there in Sacramento, and they're unelected. Yeah, we've got the legislature that is not on our side, unfortunately. And then our own regional unelected entities that we love to talk about, the Association of Bay Area Governments, affectionately known as ABAG, and the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, MTC. And what they're doing right now is they're in the process of developing what they call Plan Bay Area or One Bay Area. It's one of the links that's on this page I gave you. It's onebayarea.org. You can go there and just scroll through and look at a lot of things. I think what's important to note about the plan is that it's a 25-year plan. It's top-down central planning. There is no other way to describe it. Top-down central planning. And it has what I call the trifecta of problems, which is for the first time, really, it combines land use, transportation, and housing in one plan. Now, originally, the purpose of MTC was to make sure that a road in Alameda County connected with a road in Contra Costa County. And so there's a reason for a Metropolitan Transportation Commission. But this organization, this entity, has morphed into something way beyond that. The Association of Bay Area Governments initially was put together so that all of the cities could get together and be able to maybe leverage buying insurance for the cities. And that has morphed into something else. So between the two of them, they're kind of like the evil twins of regional planning in the Bay Area. And in The year 2008, our state legislature passed a law called SB 375. And SB 375 is the law, the implementing law that defines this top-down planning. For the first time, it said you have to, in your plans, combine land use, transportation, and housing. Now, what's happening is they're doing this because they think they're going to get $300 billion from the federal government over the next 25 years. So that's the purpose of doing this plan. The plan's been going on for a couple years. We are now in the process where they've done an environmental impact report that's called an EIR, Environmental Impact Report. They're getting ready to have hearings on the environmental impact report. As soon as we know when those hearings are happening, we will let you know. And then at the end of July or June, they should be coming up with a final plan that they're going to then submit to the federal government for the $300 billion over 25 years. In this plan, the state dictates housing numbers and the type of housing that's going to come into your town. The region dictates the land use, the mass transit, and it allocates the housing. We'll talk about that a little more later. And then the cities offer up areas for high-density housing, and these areas are called PDAs, Priority Development Areas. And what's really critical is when you talk to the city council people and when you talk to the regional guys, they always try to squirm and tell you that it's not a problem, nothing's going to happen, we don't want to control your town, we respect private property rights. When they say the cities offer up these priority development areas, and they say the city has a choice, the only choice the city has is where to put it, not whether or not they have it. And that's a real critical element. So if your town, Los Gatos, Saratoga, any of the small towns that want to preserve their character, you've got the state and the region coming down to you and saying, tough, you're going to put housing here. Do you want it here or here? But you're going to get it. And that's a real problem. This comes from the One Bay Area Plan Bay Area, and it's one of their little graphs that they show to people. And it's got, this is their policy toolbox. What you have to understand about their policy toolbox is that these are the policies that they're going to use to make sure that they get the kind of development that they want. And so if you look, you've got, they're going to use zoning, they're going to use incentives. For example, this CEQA streamlining, what they've decided in the One Bay Area is that if a developer comes in and wants to develop the kind of housing that they want to be developed, i.e. high density, stack and pack near mass transit, they'll waive the environmental requirements. Their talk here about fees and subsidies that they can use to nudge you in a certain direction. Road pricing. I want you to know, somebody came up to me last night and they said, you know, there was a report on the news and they said, the problem and the reason we have bad roads and we have high traffic and congestion, all that, is we haven't planned properly. I'm sorry. The reason we have these problems is that they have planned. They put us in this situation. They purposely decided not to build roads, to let them kind of get bad, and I'll talk about that a little more later. Parking policies. We actually had somebody go to a meeting in San Jose where these bureaucrats were discussing what they can do with parking policies to make it more difficult for you to have your car. And if you look at some of these plans for this high-density housing, they say essentially, well, we can only have one car parking space per unit. And then growth boundaries that basically restrict any kind of development outside of the town, and they force the development, what's called infill development. So that's what they're planning. The environmental impact report, when it came out, and here's the bigger picture here that we can pass around, but they actually came out with 5 different options that they're considering. Quite frankly, option 2 is the one that they want to go with, and that is priority development areas, focused upzoning. What's upzoning? They come to your town and they say, hey, you got a height limit, 2 stories? Forget that. We're going to upzone for 3 stories, 5 stories. In Berkeley, they want to upzone to 18 stories. Berkeley's upset about the plan, if you can believe that. How subsidies? Don't kid yourself. People always talk about affordable housing. Affordable housing is subsidized housing, and you need to understand that. Preferred road network. This is where they're going to put in a lot of HOV lanes. Reduced parking minimums. That's reducing the amount of parking you can have, so you don't want to drive your car. You'll take public transit. Preferred transit network, streamlining of development, and strict boundaries. You can't build outside of certain boundaries. So where am I going with this? Well, I want to go to where this impacts you the most. And that is in a policy called the Rena. And the Rena is Regional Housing Needs Allocation. Rena is the way it's pronounced to us people who are insiders. And it's designed under Government Code 65584. And it's been going on for a long time, but it's actually getting to the point where it's starting to be really noticeable. Let's talk about the Rena and what it means to your town. This comes from a letter from the State Department of Housing and Community Development to ABAG, Association of Bay Area Governments, and it's basically telling them, hey guys, this is your allocation. They go in 7-year cycles. So we're in the cycle of 2014 to 2022. There will be another cycle after 2022. So even if you accommodate the housing now, there's going to be more to come. Ad infinitum. So this comes from the Regional Housing Needs Analysis from the letter, and this says to ABAG, here are the categories of housing that you have to be prepared to develop in the Bay Area region. And it has them by income level. And it gives a total number, 187,000, and then it tells you by income level what type of housing you have to be prepared to build. Now, ABAG, Association of Bay Area Governments, as your regional non-elected entity, and a lot of them will tell you they're elected. They're not elected to ABAG. They're elected to maybe your city council or your county. But in an area like Santa Clara, for example, you would have 2 supervisors, Santa Clara supervisors, on that board, and then I think you have 3 cities that represent all of the cities in Santa Clara. And they're voting for you on all of these kinds of policies. So if you're Los Gatos and Saratoga, you don't have a voice in any of this stuff. So back to ABAG. So this is really, I think, one of the most disturbing things about this entire plan. And it comes from the Rena methodology. The Rena methodology is based on what they call the quality of life factors. If anybody has a question about any of these things, I have the documents right here. I did not make any of this stuff up, and I didn't change the wording on any of it. You can look at the documents if you want. Anyway, Ken Kirky has a document in my little book there that talks about the quality of life factors. And what he says is, when we looked at the quality of life, we looked at the median income in a jurisdiction that determines its desirability. We look at the median house value. And here's the thing that really upsets me most of all. We're going to look at the school scores. And we're going to come up with a quality of life factor that signifies higher levels of opportunity in jurisdictions in the region. So now what do we do with those 3 items? Well, being high tech, we have, and this is called the fair share component, by the way. You might want to make a note of that. We'll come back to that later. And so that's the letter that references where I found all of this stuff. So what they do, folks, is they take your city and they take those three factors and they put it in a computer model, because we're all high tech, right? And so I just took Santa Clara, but I've got one of these for each county. And you see the town and your income and your home value and your school scores. Now, why is Saratoga in red? Why is Los Gatos, why are you guys in red? Even Cupertino, what? Well, because you guys have really high school scores, and you have really high median income, and you have really high home values. So we're going to throw that into a computer model. And this is, you see the numbers behind, and this is an eye chart from ABAG that takes all of these numbers, crunches them together, and then comes up at the end over here in this corner with your Rena number for your town. And then once they do that, they have to split it out mathematically by income category. So every town, so the reason you got the number that you got over here, the total number you got over here, was that you needed to have your share of housing, and then they split it up here, very low, low, median, above median, and that's how they came up with the numbers. Again, this has been going on for years. So your town has had a number from the previous cycles, and a lot of towns never built these things. And that was okay. They were able to get away with it in the past. They're not going to be able to get away with it any longer. There's a lot of pressure for these cities and towns to build this housing. So why do we have this? Well, again, I go back to what the ABAG MTC say is the purpose of the Rena, Regional Housing Needs Allocation, and a PDA, Priority Development Area. And this came from a letter where Steve Heminger, who's the executive director of MTC, was talking about the proposed alternatives. Now remember here, we have 5 different alternatives of how we can set up this plan, and I'd encourage you to take a look at these when you have a chance, and I can send this around when I send out the email on the 5 alternatives. But what he said was the proposed alternative scenarios, this is the 5, utilize priority development areas, this is high density areas in your town. This framework, it has a strong emphasis on social equity and adopts the regional housing needs allocation methodology. This is a legitimate, this is a defined methodology by the state. It's called the 175% income redistribution. I did not make up these words. This is in the document. The complete community framework, that's another code word for sustainable community strategies. I would write that down. That's on one of my lists. Sustainable community strategies. When you go to any of these meetings, you will hear the planners talk about sustainable community strategies. And that's really code word for high density housing near mass transit. And or smart growth is another same thing. Anyway, so the complete community framework, along with the affordable housing strategy of Rena, is a primary method by which social equity is built into land use scenarios. Now, I always like to say, I'd like to translate bull crap into English. And this slide really does it for me, because this was a slide they showed at one of the MTC meetings. And they basically, somebody I guess asked them, what's the 175% income redistribution? It's not like they're going to take money out of your pocket and put it in somebody else's pocket, but they're kind of going to do it the backdoor route. And so the 175% income redistribution says we will allocate a higher percentage of low-income housing to cities with disproportionately low numbers of low-income residents. So get how that ties back to those red-lined towns. You don't have enough of low-income residents in your town, is basically what they're saying. this was America where there were property rights, but that's another story. So I want to, so there's one city, now these allocations, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, there's a formal process by which the cities have to go through when they go to ABAG to protest their numbers. And a lot of cities don't even bother going through this exercise. They just roll over, quite frankly. Well, Saratoga decided that they were going to protest their numbers. And so the initial paperwork started last September, and then there was a deadline in the February timeframe, February 18th, where they had to have the final analysis in. And this is from a meeting in Saratoga, and you know, I would say to people, even if you don't have time to go to your city council meeting, all of these things are up on your city council website in video, and you could actually go and listen to this stuff. I know sometimes it's boring, but it's amazing what you will find if you listen to this stuff. So anyway, so Saratoga decided they were going to challenge the numbers with ABAG, and this comes from testimony of one of the Saratoga residents, and I think it's very eye-opening what he says about ABAG. So let's hear Jeff talk about ABAG.
I think I'd like to sign on to the same list. I think James has presented this well and done excellent work, and the appeal makes great sense, and I would encourage the council to support the appeal. It's the obvious first step. This does, however, represent probably, if not the largest, one of the largest long-term challenges to the character of our city that we will see. There is an unholy alliance between ABAG, the League of Cities, and the nonprofit world that represents affordable housing. It should be clear to everyone that none of this will mean any affordable housing in Saratoga. A condominium that goes for $500,000 instead of $800,000 is still not going to be a place where a homeless family can relocate out of a shelter. Who's kidding who? There are other possibilities, but right now the fact that ABAG is controlled by the major cities, Oakland, San Francisco, San Jose, means that the cities like us that have essentially no voice. If this appeal is not successful, and perhaps if it is, I'd strongly encourage the council to work with staff. I know that the staff are following this issue in many ways very closely. Some small city like Saratoga has to take the lead and put together a coalition, perhaps of Bay Area, perhaps statewide. Bay Area would be easiest to start with. But the Woodsides and the Portola Valleys and the Los Altos Hills and the Tiburons and Belvederes of the world are not going to find jobs to match their populations, and they're not going to find housing without destroying the character of their communities. Those are also the communities that are bedroom communities, and they have some muscle and some voice if you look at the individuals in those communities. Someone has to pull that together before irreparable harm is done with this direction. It's been coming for a long time. Everyone knows it's a sham. It's a sort of silly joke. You have to change your housing ordinances so that you can get 400 houses, knowing full well that if you, in the next 10 years, build 8 of those 400, that would be miraculous. That's what we did last time. Does anyone expect that we will have multi-story, 20-unit to a density, 20-unit to the acre density housing built between McDonald's and See's Candy? Could we show of hands for all those who think that's likely to happen soon? So it's a paper exercise, but it is only a matter of time till those same forces, ABAG, the League of Cities, part of the nonprofit world, gets together and starts saying it's not good enough that you changed your ordinances and went through this paper gymnastic exercise. What will happen next is a requirement that you have penalties for cities that actually haven't built those units. And at that point, there will be real chaos. The time to deal with this is now. I would sort of hope that our city might take some leadership role in pulling together communities that have similar voices and similar concerns. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you, Jeff. Well said.
So that was a very well stated comment. We're hoping going forward to be talking to other groups. We've made contact with people in Marin. I'm in the East Bay. We're hoping that people in this area will come together and we will form a coalition and start fighting some of this stuff. He's really right about the potential for lawsuits. And in fact, if I can tell you what happened, I live in the East Bay, and Pleasanton is one of the towns in the East Bay. And a couple years ago, they voted not to have any more growth in the city. And they were sued by Urban Habitat, which is one of these affordable housing organizations, and they really didn't fight the lawsuit, unfortunately. But what's happening now is they were tasked by a judge that they're going to have to build these houses, and now Urban Habitat is over threatening Menlo Park, because they're going to Menlo Park and they said, we're going to do the same thing to you that we did to Pleasanton. So once you start setting up this stuff, even if you don't have to build it right now, don't kid yourself. There will come a time, as Jeff said in that video, where it's really going to be the state and the region coming down on these cities and telling them you have to build. Now, what's the implication? Well, a lot of times cities will say, we'll do this because we get grant money. That's free money. Well, the problem is, number one, it's not free money. It always comes with strings attached. And number two, it doesn't give you enough money to pay for all of the additional population your city is going to have to take on. And one of the greatest areas of impact is in the schools. There's no money to support the increased school population. I'm going to show you a little video about what happened in Dublin and Pleasanton up in my area. And by the way, if any of you guys saw any of this stuff when you came in, this is a development in Dublin, which used to be Dublin, Pleasanton, Livermore. That's kind of pretty suburban stuff. It used to be pretty suburban stuff. And now we're like big city, high density housing all over the place. It's not very pleasant. So what I'm going to show you now is, this is a video, and I had problems with it earlier, so I'm not sure if it'll click right away, but if it does, there's another way we can put it up. This is a video of a consulting firm that was hired by the city of Pleasanton to help them understand what was going to happen now that they were faced with all of this housing that they lost the lawsuit on. And so what you'll hear in this is the consultant saying, you know what, we were originally going to plan for 1.2 kids per unit, but we looked at what happened to Dublin, because Dublin already put this high density housing in. So let's hear what he has to say, and let's see if it clicks or if I have to, no. So bear with me a second here, and I'll bring it up.
So our TOD calculations were based on information that was provided by Dublin.
So out of the Dublin Ranch area, when they did their projections?
So he said our TOD. TOD is another term you need to know. TOD is transit-oriented development. So transit-oriented development is a development that you have in your PDA, Priority Development Area. Because the concept is we're going to have livable, walkable communities. We don't need our cars. We can all just kind of hang out and walk around, and, you know, that'd be cool. Okay. So what he's saying is, we looked at the TOD. If anybody's ever driven along Pleasanton, along 580 in that area, as you're going east, you'll notice on the left-hand side, on the north side of 580, there's a lot of development. And they put in an extra BART station there. And so that's where all of this priority development area stuff is coming up. Dublin, the City Council of Dublin, thought this was a great idea. So this consultant just said, we looked at the TOD area.
So our TOD calculations were based on information that was provided
by Dublin.
So out in the Dublin Ranch area, when they did their projections to build out schools, they didn't account for the fact that a lot of, like, two families would move in together, or, you know, like two brothers, and so that they, I don't know, they averaged something like 2.1 kid, and then it turned out that there was like 3.8 kids because there was more kids per household. Then they didn't count on two families moving in together. So they're actually short on elementary space because they have more elementary kids. Based on the number of houses, they just had no idea that that was going to happen.
Coming out of those units. So these are the actual TOD units, or yield factors that we're applying to what's happening in Dublin.
That's right. So the reason I wanted to highlight that, because the concern you noted, that was very real for Dublin. They thought they were going to have 1 point something, they end up with 3 point something, and that has turned out to be an issue for them. This reflects the fact that it was 3 point something that they really truly ended up with, and that's what we're working from.
Units that are in Dublin, the kinds of units that are walkable distance that people might commute and so forth. And we felt that these numbers, again, direct numbers, we're not asking for their yield factor that they calculated, but the actual data. These are appropriate yield factors based upon that.
I should back up. Saratoga, their city council voted 5-0 to challenge the Rena numbers after Jeff and a bunch of people stood up. And you should thank Trish over here. Stand up, Trish. And Trish was one of the Saratoga people that did that. So, and then we have Los Gatos, and they did a fantastic job. This is a really interesting story. There's an area in Los Gatos where they found out that there's going to be this high-density development, and a bunch of neighbors that were going to get affected by this got involved and started talking to their city council. And what's really interesting is when the planners went to tell the community about this development, they only told people within a 500-foot radius of where this development was going to be. It impacts the whole town. But they only told people, well, fortunately, a bunch of people got word of it. And Jeff from Los Gatos, stand up, Jeff, and his team, yay, they went in front of their city council. They did a fantastic set of presentations. And one of the things that's good about all of this is if we start networking and we learn from each other, we're not all reinventing the wheel, and we can share our knowledge and help each other out. Because believe me, the forces that are pushing this are very well funded and they're very well entrenched, and so it's going to be a real battle. But anyway, one of his team members, they did an analysis of what the school's impact was going to be with this, it's called, here's another term for you, AHAZ, Affordable Housing Overlay Zone. So basically what they were going to do is say, okay, here's the town of Los Gatos. We need to put this affordable housing, and we're going to put it here. We're going to overlay it right here. Okay, so they did an analysis, and the bottom line was, with the numbers that they crunched, they figured with the additional kids, it was going to be $119 million to accommodate these kids, and the developer would be able to pay $7 million of that. And so, yeah, free money, right? And so the Los Gatos households would have to pay the difference, which is $112 million. And gee, hey, Los Gatos, that was only going to be about $9,000 per household. And of course, it'll be a bond, so you won't have to worry about it. No big deal. Just float another bond. So the great thing about the Los Gatos team is they were well organized. They had a very articulate argument. They had people talk about different topics. They made a great presentation. It's still an ongoing thing, but their city council voted 7-0 to send the plan back to the planners. They said, you didn't take account of what was happening in the community. So hats off to them. I think that's... So we can do it. We can do it. Okay, so this is the interesting thing, and I have to tell you, I work with somebody behind the scenes who does a lot of the research for us. And he came up with this information about the constraints of challenging the RHNA, Regional Housing Needs Allocation. So there are certain things that ABAG will allow you to protest on. You can protest on the lack of sewers in your town, if the property might be flooded, or if land is preserved and protected from development under federal or state law, some of the open space laws. That's them telling you what you can complain about if you don't like your RHNA number. Let me tell you what you can't complain about. You can't complain about schools. So they're telling you, hey, Los Gatos, tough patooties. If it's going to cost you $9 grand per household, well, hey, man, that's the cost of doing business. We're just going to continue. So they purposely, and the people, if a town wants to protest RHNA, they almost have to hire a consultant for a couple hundred grand to help them write this up, because it's very technical, detailed. You know, it's all of these bureaucrats having to do it a certain way. Palo Alto wrote up their protests and they were denied. I think they based theirs on demographics, but sorry, that's not one of the approved constraints that you can argue about. And then the other thing, and now this is speculation on my part, so I want to make it clear up front what I'm going to say about this, but in February 2012 they came up with new limits on the constraints. So basically what they said was ABAG can override existing zoning ordinance and land restrictions of a locality. So even if you're up here in the land preserved or protected from, they don't care. They can override that. That's the way I read that. And then the next thing is any ordinance, policy, voter-approved measure, and that's what happened with Pleasanton. It was an approved voter measure that said we don't want any more development here. They can override that. That is not a justification for determination or reduction of your share of the city or county regional housing need. So again, that is actually fact. We got that off documents. What's speculation on my part is that what happens is ABAG's sitting up there, they have this plan for us, and a city comes up and says, well, we're going to challenge it based on blah, blah, blah. And ABAG goes, oh, we didn't think about that. We're going to write a rule that says they can't challenge it based on that. And that's kind of what we're seeing happening. So this is really nasty, nasty stuff. It's insidious. It's all over, and we really need to get involved in it. Yeah.
Where does ABAG get its authority to impose these requirements on you?
So the best that we can tell is that ABAG gets its authority from the state. And let me back up a little bit. The Metropolitan Transportation Commission is a legally constituted entity. And I have a chart back there. There's 17 metropolitan equivalents of MTC in California, and they're in the major metropolitan areas. And the purpose of those organizations was to handle transportation funds. ABAG kind of grew out as I don't know what to call it, an adjunct of that. They're an NGO. They're a non-governmental organization. They're an association. But from what we can tell, again, I'm not an attorney, they've been designated by the state or MTC to deal with the housing numbers. That's their role. Their role is to assign the RHNA.
Has anyone tried to get at this through the state legislature?
Well, we'd love to do that, and ultimately that's what it's going to take. But the issue is going to be, who you're going to call, right? Most of those people, I shouldn't say it like that. I don't know if the state legislature really understands the implications of this. These housing, this HCD has been going on for years and years, and they keep adding rules and rules and rules. So it's possible that your legislature doesn't really understand it. That's possible. It's possible that most of them like it. I don't know. I mean, you're going to have to talk. We would need a lot of people in the legislature, and it would probably cost a lot of money to get something like this overturned. I think ultimately that's where you have to go, but initially, if we have enough citizens in Los Gatos and Saratoga, and we're networking with people up in Marin, maybe we can start the public outrage piece, which is, I'm about public outrage right now because I don't have millions of dollars to fight this. And that's the reality of it. So I also wanted to point out, while we're talking about the plan, another aspect of the plan is the issue of transportation. And I told you they want to get you out of your cars. And if you had any question about that, just look. This is the 25-year plan from One Bay Area. And this little box over here, it's hard to read. This is the money they're going to put to roads. In the next 25 years, there's going to be no growth in road funds. But over here on the right, see that big blue thing? Transit. All the money's going to go into, and I will tell you, probably if you looked at your plan, if you looked at this plan, and if you looked at the plan in your city, probably a lot of that money's going into bike trails. So you're not even going to stay even with what they're spending now on the roads. And again, that's really on purpose. They don't want you driving your car. So let me go to the next slide, which is even worse, and that's the breakout of public transit. And they're going to put a lot of money into local bus. Anybody see all the empty buses that run around here? You're paying for that. Light rail. Look at that light rail. Well, VTA is really great, aren't they? Those guys won the award of being the second worst transportation agency in the United States of America. That just came out in a study from Berkeley, of all places. I don't remember. It was New York or New Jersey or somebody, but I mean, yeah, you'll have to catch up. And you're probably not far behind. This is heavy rail here, and this is commuter rail. I mean, these are the least efficient transportation methodologies that you can have, especially in an area like the Bay Area. If you're in San Francisco, that's fine, right? But not around here. Okay, so the next thing on the list is, again, all of these things are kind of hitting us all at once. This is a different project. It's called the Grand Boulevard Initiative. And what they want to do is they want to take, anybody go on El Camino? I go on El Camino. I go to work on El Camino. Oh my goodness. They're going to take El Camino, they're going to take out a driving lane in each direction and put high-speed bus. Now, people aren't riding the buses now, right? But they're going to buy a high-speed bus in the middle. But the best of all is on each side, a quarter of a mile deep, they're going to put high-density housing. Because you have to have density to make transit work. And so that's the plan. Now, think about this. Gridlock on just taking out a lane of traffic in each direction is going to create tremendous gridlock on that road. And the planners want to make it the Champs-Elysees of the Bay Area. That's the goal. But I think what's important about this is, and I'll tell you how this is going to happen. We can sit there and go, oh yeah, they'll never do it, right? But what they'll do is, this goes from San Jose, Santa Clara, all the way up to Daly City. And supposedly every town can make a choice about whether they want to be involved in this or not. But I'll tell you exactly how this is going to go down. There's going to be a couple of main towns along the route that are going to say, oh yeah, this is a great idea. We really want this. And then once they get those main towns and they start buying those buses, hey, it's already done, right? Why are you other towns resisting? You're just going to have to go along with the program. That's how these things start. The whole purpose of this is to impact your mobility. They are designing for congestion. They're limiting parking. And I have a document, again, from MTCA BAG said that we want to increase the cost of owning and operating an automobile in the Bay Area by 5 times what it currently is. So we got another program called HEAL, Healthy Eating, Active Living. And Santa Clara and San Mateo have signed up for HEAL. So what HEAL, the concept behind these things all tie together, right? The concept behind HEAL is that if you don't live in your car, if you don't have to drive in your car, and you can walk to the grocery store, and you can walk to work, or you can walk to transit that'll get you to work, you'll be healthier. There's a lot of control going on here that we'll lose control. So I kind of was sort of goofing around with this. You know, this bud's for you, this bus is for you. You look at those buses, and that's the other thing about this. All of this stuff is subsidized. It can't work financially for people. And so they're using taxpayer funds, and they're using grant money and all kinds of incentives to get these things built, and they're not economically viable. And that's another piece of the puzzle. There's a great website, and I have it listed on here. It's called theamericandreamcoalition.org, and they've got a sub-site that's Smart Growth Disasters. This is smart growth. That's what this is called, smart growth sustainable development. This is smart growth disasters, and if you go to that website and you look at the smart growth disasters, they talk about 3 towns: Portland, Cincinnati, and our very own San Jose. So you can go and look, and the person that did that work, and it's a couple years old, but he did a study about transportation, about housing, and how all of the promises of smart growth, which is that people get out of their cars, they live close to work, everything else, all of that stuff is a pipe dream. It never happens. And I'm sure if somebody wanted to do the kind of study that you're talking about, it would probably show the same thing, and somebody probably should. We're looking for volunteers. So I always get people saying, don't worry, it's not funded, the state's broke. You know what? The plan is the presumption. That's my comment. Once the plan is there, somebody can sue. Once the plan is there, there's going to be very powerful forces that are going to want to force your town into complying with the plan. And that's what exactly happened with Pleasanton, and I already talked about that. I have on my website, and we gave you a little card when you came in, like a postcard size, and one of the things on the postcard is a picture of my YouTube channel. All of the videos that you see today and others are on that YouTube channel, and I would encourage you to subscribe, because every time I upload a new video, you'll get a notice that it came out. There are 4 great videos there from Los Gatos, from Jeff and his group. And I just want to play one of them, because this is one of the people that suddenly realized what was going to happen to her home. Let me see if I can get to the right.
Just imagine living on the 14% of that line. My name is Choni Yangzam, and I live off of Oka Road. My husband, Podrick Mahuna, and I moved here 4 months ago. We bought the house, and it was explained to us that the orchard would be under consideration for development, and 29 single-family homes would be built. If we knew that up to 500 AHAs would be considered, we would have reconsidered our purchase. And unfortunately, we only heard about AHAs from a neighbor 6 weeks after we moved in. From what I understand, there has been no reasonable explanation of the decision-making process and selection criteria for the AHA sites. We still don't understand why substantial size lots are not being considered, and the general plan committee meeting minutes related to site selections are removed from public records. Requests for information have been ignored and dismissed. Decisions were made behind closed doors. With the proposed AHA's plan, 86% of affordable housing will be on only 14% of the land. This is social injustice. Segregating the town diversity responsibility is being burdened on the 14% of Los Gatos land. AHAs should be sprinkled throughout the town instead of segregating it to the corner of the town. According to site selection criteria for regional housing needs assessment, Rena, sites should be, and I quote, nominated based on transit accessibility. This sustainability component thus ensures the majority of the growth is focused in transit-rich areas to maximize use of public transit and existing infrastructure, end of quote. All of the AHA sites under consideration, Oka Road sites are farthest from public transportation, but rejected sites lie directly on public transport lines. Also, most rejected sites are within half a mile walking to the nearest market and coffee shops. The Oka Road sites are over a mile walk. This does not comply with the objectives of SB 375 for developing pedestrian-friendly housing. Some notable large lots are walkable and close to public transportation are rejected or not considered for AHOS are Oak Rim, North Blossom Hill, 17 acres, Sisters of the Holy Name Convents, 12 acres, Los Gatos Lodge 8, and Acura Bentley 6. All rejected sites require up to 0.4 mile walk to public transport, whereas Oka roadside require closer to a mile walk. This does not comply with the objectives of SB 375 for developing housing served by transit. Sisters of the Holy Names Convent is an excellent site to be considered. It complies with the SB 375, and the site is currently zoned for R120 for single-family residentials and not HR for hillside. It's pedestrian-friendly, close to local employment, shops, and restaurants. With 12 developable acres, it is a very large site and can accommodate plenty of affordable housing. It's also located very close to public transportation and is currently a 3-story building which cannot be seen from town.
All right, Ms.
So we would
Yanza.
like,
Finish up.
we would like the town council members to rebalance the AHOS and integrate it across Los Gatos. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very
What's
much.
going on in your neighborhood. And as she said in the beginning, you know, we thought there were going to be 29 homes near the home, but it's going to be 500. I don't know if you caught that, but with this housing, density housing, it's going to be 500 homes. The other point she was making was that the way the planners did this, and they probably did it because they, well, I won't say why, but they probably had a reason. They decided to put all of the housing in one part of Los Gatos, which was way away from everything. Well, the whole purpose of this the whole purpose of the Rena is that the things are close to close to transit, and they cited these things way the heck out of the main drag. So that was one of the bases on which the Los Gatos people challenged the planners. There's a lot of funny stuff going on when you get into these things, and a lot of people are manipulating the system, if you will. Okay, so the other thing I want to point out, and this is a whole separate topic, and we don't have time to go into it tonight, but I want to point out unaffordable housing and open space. Harvard did a study, and the question that they asked in the study was, does America have an affordable housing crisis? And the answer to that question was, you have areas like California, and everybody's complaining about affordable housing. We don't have enough affordable housing. Oh my goodness, what's going to happen? What are we doing here? And their studies basically said there's no affordable housing crisis in the United States. What there is zoning and land use controls play a dominant role in making housing expensive. So when you take land out of production, and we can all have a conversation about open space and the values of open space, and hey, I love open space. I have dogs, and I like to let them go run. But generally speaking, open space starts out as somebody's private property, number one. And number two, once you start taking that land out of production, then you force expensive housing, or you have what we have now, which is people complaining that people are buying in Stockton and driving to Santa Clara for a job. Well, you forced them out to Stockton because there's nothing affordable in the Bay Area. So I just want to leave you with this thought. Again, I looked at a study, and it was I think 2005, but as of that point, 25% of the land in the Bay Area is protected open space. That's 1 million acres of land in the Bay Area is open space. There's 4.5 million acres, so we took a quarter of the land out of production. I fly. If you ever fly over the Bay Area, there's a lot of land. We're not running out of land. We've just set a lot of it aside. And again, that's another issue. The final thing I want to end with is the comment that government goes to people who show up. And we haven't been showing up because we've all been working and busy and everything else. So what we hope to do is start pushing back like Saratoga and Los Gatos are doing. We'd like to develop a coalition of towns. There's no silver bullet in this. There's no easy solution. It's going to be long-term. This stuff has been going on for a long time. On the back of your handout, there's all of the housing numbers in your area, and you need to be aware of those. So think locally, act locally. There's regional meetings coming up. I will say the one saving grace about SB 375 is that it requires public input. So let's give them our input. There will be meetings coming up, we think probably the end of this month, and probably some will be coming up in the June timeframe, and if you're on my email list, we'll let you know when those are going to be and what you can do about it. There are local meetings that you can attend with your city council. I always say pick up the mighty pen. Start writing to the letters to the editor. Write to the Patch. That's an electronic online newspaper. Write to your local papers. Tell them what's going on. Courtesy of Trish, we have a letter. Susan, you want to pass them out? We have. We're going to pass out a letter that Trish and the Saratoga team wrote. And the idea here again is, you know, the regional guys aren't going to listen to us. A lot of the local guys might not listen to us, but if enough of us write to our city council and our county, maybe we can start having an impact. So this is a sample letter that her team wrote, and I think one of the big comments here is if you adopt this one-bay plan, you are voluntarily giving up your county and city's rights to determine how best to address future needs of your community. These city council and county people are going to become irrelevant. If these regional people get their way, and there was a big meeting down in San Jose about a month ago, and the purpose of the meeting was to talk about how the Bay Area should be one big city, one big regional government. That happens here, and you have absolutely no, you think you don't have a say now? You're going to have absolutely no say once they go regional. And they just seeded that organization with $1 million worth of seed money to start a thing called the Institute for Regional Studies. So these people are very serious. They want the Grand Boulevard Initiative. They want the high-density housing near mass transit, and that's the objective. So take a look at this letter. On the bottom of the letter, I just happened to put your MTC, Metropolitan Transportation Commission, your 2 members, and on the back we have your ABAG executive board members. There's a primary and an alternate for each. Your county supervisors, and then links to all of the cities so you can get the information there. Jeff.
I was going to say that don't give up on your town councils.
Yeah.
Because it was our experience that the town council was very ignorant. The overall town council was ignorant of all of the ramifications of Rena and ABAG. And part of what we've been doing with Los Gatos has been educating our own town council. So don't assume that they're working against you and that they're all part of this big collusion or something. It's a lot of times it's being shoved down their throats, and they don't have any way to deal with it. And it would help them to know how their residents feel. So I would urge everybody to go to the council meetings and get involved.
Yeah, and that brings up another really good point. A lot of these elected officials they're doing this sort of as a part-time job, right? They're not doing it as a full-time job, and they rely on staff. Well, their staff is trained by an organization called the American Planning Association. The American Planning Association loves this stuff. They love the high-density housing near mass transit. So what happens is, and a lot of times your city council, they really don't know. You're right. And they're well-intentioned. And the planner comes to them and they say, well, we got to do this. And they go, oh, okay, because nobody's there to stand up and say something different. So what Jeff said is absolutely correct. There are some people on city councils that just absolutely love this stuff. There's a guy in Santa Clara, Sam Liccardo. Anybody know who he is? He loves this stuff. But a lot of them just don't know. And so it's up to us to educate them and help them along. I have a website. It's bayarealiberty.org. That's what's on the postcard there. I will put you on my email list if we have your email address, and you'll be getting notices from me. I've got the YouTube channel that I post a lot of stuff to. There's a lot of video up there. from previous meetings. Those 4 Los Gatos meetings are great. Saratoga, we've got 2 videos, one from Jeff that you saw and one from their director of planning talking about what the Rena is and how they're going to challenge it. So really, the future of your town is up to you. If we let this happen, it's going to be the fundamental transformation. You won't recognize your town. And as Jeff on the video said, our towns are just going to be wiped off. We're going to be looking like one big megalopolis if this thing continues to go. So it's your choice. Do you want to have the fundamental transformation of your town, or do you want to preserve your town?